everybody, and welcome to Sketchbook Session 2. So, firstly, I want to address how loud everything is. I'm very sorry. It snowed here 2 weeks ago, and now today it's decided to be 70 degrees, and because of that I have every single fan in my room on. So there's going to be some background noise. I'm very sorry. But today we're just going to mess around in my sketchbook a little bit, and I'm going to draw some OCs because that is what I feel like doing. So I haven't drawn my Monster Kid trio in a while, so I think we're going to draw them today, and I'm just going to probably doodle Orchid to start. I'm going to try not to make this like too terribly long of a video like last time, just because that video literally took hours to figure out and render, and my computer just like really did not want to handle it. In the end, I had to split it up into 2 parts, render them each out individually, and then put them back into one project and finally render that out. And I just don't feel like doing that again. I feel like it's really hard on my laptop, and it's just like, I don't know, it's too much. So I'm gonna try to keep these a little bit more brief, at least until I figure out how to edit it in such a way where it doesn't seem quite as long and doesn't take up a huge amount of length. I don't know. But anyways, I just wanted to touch on, before I maybe talk about my OCs a little bit, thank you to everyone who thank you to everyone who left suggestions for my setup in the last sketchbook session, because I had a lot of very helpful tips, both about like my filming setup and my audio. Someone let me know that my audio was like really clipping in the last sketchbook session, and I'm very sorry. I feel like it's probably going to be happening again today, but I just have not had the opportunity to fix it yet. So we're still in general a huge work in progress, but hopefully I'll figure out something soon that will kind of give me a good setup for filming these videos, because I do like doing them. There's something about just literally drawing in my sketchbook that feels nice to do for a video whenever I can't really get something else together. It's better than not uploading at all, you know? So thank you for your suggestions and for your tips. I literally had people send like videos of their setup to my Instagram and everything, and I feel like that was just really helpful. I can kind of see how other people do things and get a couple ideas of my own, and, you know, I think I'll be able to come up with a good setup in the next couple of months here. Like, I think a lot of it is just my room is very ill-suited for this. I touched on it in the last video, but there's a lot of different light sources, and I only have the one window, so I think one of the first steps is going to need to be to just invest in some better lighting equipment, which is something I've been needing to do for a while anyways. I really only have one ring light that I use to film my videos, and other than that, it's just a couple of mounted lights that I have on the side of my desk and natural light from the window. So if it's raining or cloudy, overcast, it just normally doesn't turn out that good. So I think some better, brighter lights will benefit a lot. And I'm thinking maybe we might even invest in a better table, because as you can see, this one just is absolutely covered in paint, which, it's a look. I kind of like it. It's nice, but I'm kind of wanting a slightly cleaner look for some of these videos, you know? Just because I think it gives just a nicer atmosphere, and I think a lot of people watch these for the nice atmosphere, and I like to edit things in a way where everything's kind of visually pleasing, and with videos like this I can't hide behind all of the LUTs in color grading that I put on some of my other videos to make it look kind of nice. So yeah, anyways, moving on from the technical side of things, I'm just starting out here by drawing my character Orchid. Sorry, I once again probably won't be able to talk for this video. But these characters that I'm going to be drawing here are from a very underdeveloped comic idea I have that's very much still alive in my mind. I called it Monstrosity for a long time. I don't know if I'm going to be calling it that, but the premise is just sort of like weird. Like it's an alternate universe where the time period is a little bit ambiguous. It's like everything seems like a combination between the mid-2000s, the 90s, and the 80s, just because something happened that sort of sent the timeline in a different direction and made things develop differently, but then some things developed the same way, but in a different order, so it's kind of off. It all feels weird. Kind of think Gravity Falls, and how everything in Gravity Falls seems just like very ambiguous. You can't really tell at all what time period it is, because they have like, I guess, cell phones, but then they don't have some things, and they dress like Dipper wears a vest. Like, what's that about? But that's sort of what's going on here. But this is the main character. Her name is Orchid. I don't want to give too much away, but she is the adopted sister of the two other lead characters. They're brothers. Their names are Paul and Randler. But they kind of go on all these crazy adventures with each other. And they do that for a reason, because they're all part monster. And that is for a reason that I also don't want to really reveal at this time, because right now I'm not sure if it'll be like super plot relevant, like knowing how they became monster kids or why. But anyways, it's a fun thing. I imagine if I ever get to make it, like the original idea was that this would be a comic, which I still would really like to do. I just don't really have any good experience making comics. So, I don't know, maybe some kind of interactive game if nothing else, but I imagine it to have sort of maybe a Scooby-Doo Monster of the Week format until it gets into the greater plot. But it has a lot of different genre inspirations. But I think the core of it will mainly just be the trio hanging out, their dynamic, and the dynamics with the different friends, and Orchid, her family is weird. There's like a lot of supernatural things happening with her, obviously, because she's a monster girl, but the rest of the town doesn't really know that. They don't know where she comes from, and suddenly Kat, Randler, and Paul's mom just takes her in. So there's like stuff with that going on with the town, and I feel like some people are going to be really suspicious, like, where'd this weird girl come from? But it's a story that I really want to make at some point. It's a lot of fun to draw these characters, and I am a big fan of their dynamics, and there's some of the few characters that I have come up with and written where they actually seem like a group of friends, which, wow, low bar, right? But I think it is one of the more difficult things to do, like to write a dynamic that seems realistic, like these people would actually hang out and interact, you know. So, yep, there's that. I sure am great at talking during these videos, right? But I have a lot of fun drawing them. I hear about people starting, you know, like little projects and characters, like maybe not even with the intention of doing anything with it, or not with the intention of, you know, making a full story, but having just a story in their head. That way it gives them like something to draw and sort of a creative outlet whenever you're trying to improve your art and you're trying to like come up with ideas in your head. So right now these are sort of mine. I always kind of have at least one project like this. And I've gone through a lot in the last couple of years, and I have a few sort of active ones now where it's like, this is, if I'm drawing characters that are OCs, these are the projects that the OCs are coming from. Like, I have this one, then I have my Viking kids, and I have a couple of others that, I don't know, the characters are more like one-off characters, and I still draw from Nightfall sometimes, which was an actual comic that lasted for one chapter. I feel like if I were to make any of these into a comic series, it would either be this one with my monster kids, or it would be Nightfall. Just because I actually spent time writing and figuring that out. Like, I was very passionate about that project for a while, but just couldn't execute it right. Like, writing was all over the place, the characters were all over the place, and it just got to be too much for me. And you know you're not ready to like make a comic when you create one chapter of a comic that isn't even like super long, and then you pat yourself on the back and go on hiatus because you just worked so hard creating that one chapter of your comic. Like, if I were to create a comic now, I probably would make the whole first chapter and then release it week by week while I work on the next few chapters, you know? That way it's like got some momentum and sustainable. And like, I actually started working on this comic that way. I believe it was the beginning of 2018, and then I just was like, I don't really like the art style anymore, I want to change it. And I changed it to closer to what this is, because it started out having a much more simplistic art style, which I think was like nice, because you need to have a simple art style if you're going to make a comic, because you're going to drive yourself crazy drawing characters over and over again if they're like too detailed. One of the issues that I ran into with Nightfall, but they just weren't detailed enough for me, to the point where I was like kind of getting bored of it. I think you gotta find a balance of something that's enjoyable to draw and something that fits your style and your artistic voice, and something that doesn't drive you crazy drawing every single week. Because if you're publishing a weekly comic or anything serialized like that, you're gonna get burned out real quick, let me tell you. I got burned out after one chapter of a manga style black and white comic, because this one, Monstrosity, is going to be color comic. I always planned on it being color. I think it'll always be color, just because I don't think manga, it's not for me. I like colors too much. Gosh, last week I made a whole video about colors, so I think we can all tell that it's not really the right path for me to go and try to make something that completely goes against my artistic style, something that isn't in color and isn't complex enough. I'm also now realizing that this pose kind of doesn't make sense, but that's just all part of keeping a sketchbook, I guess. Making art that just doesn't always make a lot of sense. Maybe it's just relatable. Maybe Orchid is just standing in a very awkward way, because she's in an awkward situation. And that's something I can relate to, but I think I'm just gonna fix her hand a little bit to make it look less weird. I know that people were talking about for a while, well, I mentioned doing a video on characters, and I can't remember which video it was, and I got a lot of positive feedback from people being like, yeah, talk about your characters more, we want to hear about them. So I guess I'm curious, would you guys want me to tell you about my characters in this format, more like in a sketchbook session, or would you want more dedicated videos on like character profiles? Because I'm hesitant to make a dedicated video just because, I don't know, I don't have a whole lot on every single character that I have. Like, I feel like if I did videos, I would probably give sort of a short synopsis of each character from a series, and the dedicated video would be on that particular series, and that would sort of be the point of it all, instead of this video is about Rose, or this video is about Quintessa, because even if I did that, I feel like I have enough material on both those characters to make a video about it, but that's an ongoing project, and I wouldn't want to spoil too much, because that's something that I could, like, realistically see myself maybe trying to do something with it in the next couple of years, like, maybe not that soon, but you guys know what I mean. I don't want to spoil anything if people in my audience might potentially want to read the actual story. So would you guys just sort of want this me talking vaguely about my characters, maybe to get you guys interested in them, only to not deliver at all by never making a comic about any of them. I mean, I feel like it might be interesting to do like a Q&A, like if you guys have questions about my characters, like what they're like, what their background is, like you could maybe leave them in the comments, and then during Sketchbook Session videos I could maybe answer a couple questions or go over them, and I feel like that might be entertaining. So let me know if that's something that you guys might be interested in. And on that note, just in general, if there are questions that you have that you want me to answer during a sketchbook session, just like leave it in the comments, because I would definitely love to see what you guys are interested in me talking about, and I would love to have material to focus on during sketchbook sessions so I am not just rambling. I know people said in the last sketchbook session that they were okay with the rambling, and it was actually kind of nice because it took their mind off their drawing. They could just kind of focus. But it also makes me a little nervous because I'm just rambling for 45 minutes, and I don't know, is that something that you guys want to see? Like, it especially makes me nervous whenever I just go like quiet. Like, I don't like going quiet like that. I think that's a little bit like rough, because then I have to go in and edit around it and whatever. Anyways, my point being, gosh, if we can actually get to the point here. If you guys have questions of really any kind, as long, like, don't get too personal, it's kind of like weird, no one wants to hear that. If you have questions of an art nature or about my OCs or something that you want me to answer in sketchbook sessions, just leave them down below and I'll try my absolute best to actually write them down and have a list of them so that we can discuss next time I have a sketchbook session, which I hope to be fairly regularly, because at this point these videos are pretty easy to make, they're fun to make, they help me to knock out a page in my sketchbook, so expect more of this because I think it's a good format for me, and I think you guys for the most part received it pretty well and enjoyed it. So any week that I don't have a planned video, I'll probably be doing a sketchbook session. Alright, so Orchid is done, so I'm gonna draw some of the other boys and then we'll figure out the rest of the spread. We're not gonna do anything too crazy today, but I do want to draw all three of them. Alright, I think we're gonna go for Paul next. He is the tallest boy. And he is also, in fact, the tallest boy. So, just make sure to unsubscribe below. Paul, I don't know what to say about him other than he is very emo and, like, quite bashful, and he's the lowest energy member of the group. He, like, doesn't sleep, and I don't know. He's kind of just based on my whole friend group in high school. He's like the personification of them because he like draws all the time and is like a very average student, which I think if I were to lump myself and all my friends together in high school, we would be all decently average students. We are also all homeschooled, which is a weird detail, but anyways, he draws. He's low energy, he doesn't sleep, but he also like works on cars and has a weird like athletic side, which is also sort of consistent with my high school friend group. So you're just discovering a lot of weird stuff about my high school friend group from this dude here. So learning lots of things today. But he's great. He adds sort of this realistic, deadpan practicality to the group, because I would say both Orchid and Randler are both kind of like optimistic in a way that can be like really impulsive and kind of like off the rails. Like, if anyone's gonna get them in trouble as a group, especially with like adults, like actual serious real life trouble, it's gonna be Orchid and Randler. And Paul has more of like a better head on his shoulders whenever it comes to like what is okay to do for their monster hunting activities and what might not necessarily be safe or, like, you know, fly. Like, Orchid, I'd probably say, is objectively the smartest member of the group, but she gets so enthusiastic sometimes that I think some of that natural logic can go out the window, you know? She just, like, would do anything for science. Whereas Paul would do anything to just, you know, stay alive. He's got that self-preservation on the mind, despite being an emo boy. Like, he's not a coward, but he is a realist. And he doesn't want, like, his little brother and adopted sister to go and get themselves in serious trouble and get hurt or something. So, he's the voice of reason. He's the straight man. That's what he does. But in terms of what he does, like I said, he likes to draw. He works on cars. He's like more of a technical artist. He likes to draw like still lifes and very intricate things. Like, I would say he has a very logical mind. Like, of course, he likes to draw cars and like motorcycles. It's one of his main things. He likes to work on his like motorcycle, quote unquote. It's really like just a dirt bike, basically. Most people would call it a dirt bike, but he thinks it's really cool. So, for his sake, I'll call it a motorcycle. But yeah, that's about as close to danger as he's willing to get, is his dirt bike. But the other two are kind of impulsive, prone to injury and poor judgment, prone to getting them all into difficult situations. In terms of school, he doesn't really have a whole lot of friends, because he's like quiet. He's a shy boy. He just kind of hangs out with Orchid and his brother, and I would say starting out, like at the beginning of the story even, Orchid's probably like more friends with Randler than she is with Paul, but like I said, their family kind of adopts her. Like, not kind of adopts her, they like legally actually adopt her. So they're kind of forced to get along, and I think that they develop a deeper bond at that point. But, you know, he's a little bit harder to get to know just because he's like quiet and stuff, and he has like some emotional baggage because like he misses his dad, and his mom and dad aren't together anymore. So yeah, so that's another detail, because they moved away from their childhood home because their parents split up. So Kat, their mom, is just single mom power, and she goes and adopts like a whole other kid. So she's like next level serious mom. Whenever it's like you're already struggling and you're willing to adopt another kid, it's like a lot. But for the record, Orchid isn't an orphan. She just has an evil dad, which is about as much of that as I'm going to talk about. Yeah, her dad is not a good person. He's an evil and genius guy, so he means well, but he also does it. But yeah, I don't want to spoil anything of that, and it's not as fleshed out and planned out as I want it to be yet at this point, but that's about all you need to know. She came to the town because she wanted to get away from her evil dad because he's doing sketchy stuff, and she was living in their treehouse, Paul and Randler's treehouse, and they found her, and they're like, "This is our treehouse. Why are you here?" And eventually, Kat was just like, "Gosh, we can't let this random kid live in our treehouse. Like, we'll take her in and feed her because she's gonna be in our treehouse anyways, so we might as well." And hey, the rest is history, dude. So that's where that treehouse comes in that you guys see once in a while. It's a weird story. I don't know if it's any good, but I like my kids. And I like drawing my kids. So, yes. I feel like I made Paul look not amazing in this drawing. I don't know. He's like fine, but I don't really like how he looks a whole lot, so I apologize. But that's just where we're at today. We're drawing things that aren't the most amazing. But it's okay. I think I'm gonna add some fills to this, and we'll move on to Randler. And I'll give you guys like a nice little plot summary of Randler. And then, I don't know, maybe we'll try filling in the rest of the page, maybe we won't. We'll see how much time we have. I feel like I draw so slow still. I think I've spent way too much time on these two drawings that I've done so far, so I'm sorry. I'm trying to pick stuff where it would not take quite as much time for me to draw as it did in the last video. Like, I know most of you were like, oh, it's totally fine, because I just throw this in the background whenever I'm working in my sketchbook, but I don't want to bore anybody. Alright, let's move on to Randler now. I temporarily lost my pink pen and went around searching for it frantically, but we're back. And we're ready to draw the last boy. So Randler is a fun character. He's honestly just like a lot. Think of the spunky male lead from like a DCOM, and you'd get pretty close to what Randler's personality is supposed to be. He's enthusiastic, he's energetic, he's a little dude. And I don't know, it's just like, he's fun to draw and to like come up with little stories for, because he reminds me of a lot of kids that I knew whenever I was a kid. Like, all the neighborhood kids that I played with, I feel like are sort of just like a portrait of Randler, but like, I think Randler is probably like nicer than some of them were, like no shade, but he's like at that age where he's like very sweet, despite being, you know, very into sports and like, you know, very much like wanting to go run and play and do boy things. He's still like really likes to hang out with his brother and his mom, so hasn't hit that teen angst phase quite yet, but we'll see. Of course, Paul is already deep in that phase. Will he ever exit that phase? Who knows, but he's very confident, he's very social, he has like more friends, and he doesn't struggle quite as much with the whole school atmosphere, like moving schools and stuff. It's like they moved schools not that long ago whenever the story kind of begins, and he already has a couple of friends when the story begins. He has a little group, they get together and play like this story's version of Dungeons and Dragons, but like Paul kind of just hangs out with them even though they're like a couple grades lower than he is. He hasn't really found anyone his age who he clicks with, so I think Orchid coming into their life was nice for him because she's a little bit closer to his age. She's between Paul and Randler in age. So it was kind of nice for him to have someone who he could relate to a little bit better. And someone outside the family situation who he could talk to about his struggles and his angst. So as the story progresses and moves on, he gets a little bit, you know, better at certain social things. Like, he gets a few more friends who he can relate to a little bit more, and he develops. He gets that character development, but he's still altogether like a reclusive boy. And that's okay. Like, some people are just reclusive boys. But we're talking about Randler right now. So I actually completely didn't even mention, like, Paul and his, like, Monster Kid stuff, but these boys are both monster kids as well. Like I said, Orchid was a monster kid. So, like, I want to mention quickly Paul's monster kid kind of abilities and what he is before I talk about Randler's, because they, I don't know, kind of go hand in hand. I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm disorganized because all of this is just coming, like, from my brain, and some of these projects I haven't, like, actually worked on in terms of, like, plot in a long time. It's just all in my brain, and it's disorganized because I'm disorganized. But Paul is, like, a spider boy, and one of his, like, big character things in terms of, like, how his powers work, because they're monster kids, but they kind of have superpowers too, but their powers can be both, like, advantageous and they can have really negative effects as well. So Paul has, like, sort of superhuman abilities and stuff in terms of strength, because he's a spider boy. But what comes with that is he has, like, this temper thing, where occasionally he loses his temper and kind of goes into this terrifying, creepy spider mode, and that's sort of what he fights against. And one reason why he's more of a social outcast than the other two, because even though I feel like his ability is a little bit less apparent, he still has, like, horns, and he's got these little 3 slits under his eye, which are, yes, more eyes. He just keeps them closed most of the time because he doesn't want to freak people out. Blends in, but he doesn't, and everyone just thinks, like, oh, you just, like, wear horns all the time because, like, you're a weird emo kid. They don't know that, like, he actually legit has horns because he's, like, a monster kid. You think everyone in the school just thinks that these kids are, like, weird, and Randler's friends, because they're younger, kind of think that his weirdness is cool, but the older grades aren't too fond of Orchid or Paul. Orchid kind of looks like a cool goth girl, though, so she can get away with it more, but, like, Paul just doesn't fare as well as the other ones. But yeah, Randler, so Paul is a spider, and Randler has, like, bat powers. He has, like, this echolocation kind of ability, because he's, like, a little bat, and then he can also, like, turn into a bat, basically, and, like, fly around. And in his, like, little human form, he has these wings, or not wings, he has, bat ears. So he uses those for, like, the echolocation. That's really his only physical trait that's visible. But he wears this little black cape everywhere because he's a bat, and he just really owns the fact that he's a bat, like a little vampire boy. But he's kind of the last person you would expect to be a little vampire boy. I don't know. I'm very entertained by Randler as a character. And, like, I say his name is Randler. That is the name that he goes by whenever him and his friends play their version of, like, D&D or whatever. His actual name is Jamie. But, like, everyone, he just prefers to be called Randler at this point, that everyone just calls him Randler, because he just, like, won't answer to anything else. Like, when he introduces himself to the other kids at school, he introduces himself as Randler, not as Jamie. So no one kind of, we don't know his real name, but no one calls him that, you know, because he's just a weird kid, and he's very confident in his quirkiness. He owns it a lot more, whereas Paul is a lot more self-conscious of it. He doesn't really take to his own quirks that much, which kind of makes Paul and Randler foils to each other at some point, because they sort of have the qualities that the other lacks. Like, Paul is very reserved and careful and calculating. He's more logical, and Randler is more impulsive, and he thinks with his heart. He's more emotional, and he's more social. He doesn't have as much self-awareness as Paul does. So I think that in terms of character development and trajectory, that they'll learn from each other a lot in the actual story, which is fitting because, you know, they're brothers and everything. And if you have siblings who are like very different from you, I feel like that's a very normal thing. You tend to teach each other things, or you just tend to maybe not get along that much at all because you just have so little in common and you think so differently. But they do get along very well because, you know, Paul is Randler's big brother. He likes to watch out for him, even though he's like probably not going to stop any bullies from beating anybody up. But that's the trio and their kind of dynamics. Like I said, Orchid and Randler get along really well because they can get really enthusiastic about things and kind of nerd out, and Randler also tends to be the more academic one between himself and Paul. Like, not with everything. He would get, you know, good grades in the subjects that he likes, which are science and more like literature, because he likes stories. That's why he likes science. He likes astronomy and like space and, you know, the things that would interest a 12-year-old or so boy who's just getting exposed to the cool stuff in the universe. But Paul is so interested in like his little hobbies, and, you know, he wants to kind of be a mechanic when he grows up, that he doesn't focus on school too much, much to the disappointment of his mother, because his mom is just like, I get it, you're like really into the art thing and the working on cars and mechanics, but, you know, you can like try a little bit harder at, you know, literature if you want to. Can you try a little more at English? Like, I'm just asking for a decent grade here. And I think he'll get decent grades most of the time, but other times I think that he is sort of more prone to doing things at the last minute, and he gets sidetracked. You guys know that one person in your life who has like a one-track mind, and they're sort of absent-minded, and they always seem to do things at the last minute, and it might kind of irritate you even, because they'll do it at the last minute and it'll still like turn out okay. It's maybe not great because it's nerve-wracking for them to do things at the last minute, but they'll still, you know, do all right. That's sort of his situation. But yeah, that's the guys. Like I said, Orchid and Paul tend to have the deeper conversations. They both kind of have daddy issues, so that connects them, because like I said, Orchid's dad is just a tad bit evil, and Paul's dad, he's more of like, he's a very nuanced character. He's not really a bad guy. It's just one of the stories where parents just didn't work out between them, but because his mom doesn't particularly like his dad, he doesn't really get to see his dad as much, so it's like a struggle for him. Because Orchid's running from her dad, and Paul would just really like to see his dad and be around his dad again, so it's like a weird dynamic, even though they both do have daddy issues. So, yeah. Anyways, lots of random stuff discussed today with the guys. I just realized that I didn't record Randler's shoes too well, but there they are. So here's the trio. I think we might do a little bit of shading and a couple other doodles to finish this out. So I ended up redrawing Paul's face because it just looked absolutely horrendous and I couldn't do that to you guys. So to finish up, I think I'm just going to be doodling some random expressions of some of the characters in this empty space, because I like doing expressions and I need some practice with it. So I think this first one is going to be a stern Randler. Because I think in terms of how often I draw the characters, I probably draw him the least. Just because I had the most trouble designing him for sure. I think I have landed in a pretty decent spot, but whenever I was sort of developing them and designing them, they were like a big character design challenge for me for a while. They were kind of the first little project I did in any of my sketchbooks. Randler, he used to look pretty different. Let's just put it that way. He used to have like a different ability, and then I kind of changed all their abilities to make them more cohesive and sort of give this story a spookier edge. Because he was more of like a cat boy before. That's why he's got like the bat ears. That part carried over in terms of design, but that's kind of the only thing that carried over. So this stern Randler kind of turned into more of a sad Randler. So right now we have a sad Randler boy. So that's very unfortunate. Someone help him. He looks very upset. Who hurt you? Let me help you, Randler boy. In terms of style with this, I'm definitely a lot happier than I used to be with how all the characters look, but it's still not quite what I want it to be. I'm still kind of playing around with how I draw everyone. Like, Orchid's obviously the character that I draw the most, and she's definitely the most kind of developed of the three. So I need to work on these other two boys. I think it mostly stems from the fact that I very rarely draw boys in general, and it's something that I need to definitely fix. Because whenever you have characters that are boys, you can't just neglect them. My art style is way more developed for female characters, so it's not like, oh, I don't like drawing boys. I used to pretty much only draw male characters, like, before I learned how to draw female characters. And then I focused on drawing female characters, and that's like all my style was for a while, and I didn't really learn how to translate that to male characters. But I mean, admittedly, this style is like so much more vague. I think that it kind of carries whatever pretty well. I think that this style is pretty ambiguous. But it's still something I need to practice, because like the proportions of the little faces and like the eyes and everything, I want to make sure that all the characters still have like good appeal to them that's all their own, and not just based on Orchid looks the most original and the most appealing out of these because she's just like my default how I draw female characters, and that's more developed. I want everyone to be developed because I actually spent time developing them, if that makes sense. I might just be rambling at this point, but we'll see. Here's a very rare sight, never seen before. It's a somewhat happy Paul, so smile looks a little terrifying, not gonna lie. Like, I don't know about all that, Paul. You look a little weird. Hold on, let's fix that. Did we fix it? It kind of just looks high now, but I'll take this over the last thing. I feel like, I don't know, he still looks deadpan, and that still fits his character at least. Alright, let's do an Orchid. Let's do a confused expression for Orchid. I wonder if any of the screaming birds outside is picking up on the recording here. It's pretty nice to listen to. It's so warm in this house right now that we've just got all the windows open. And the weather just continually decides to do weird stuff where I live. I really have a lot of fun with Orchid's design whenever her third eye is showing, because I can do like weird things with it in terms of the expression, because it can be like very expressive. Yeah. I think this is more like a wince at this point. Sometimes the drawing starts and it just doesn't go the direction that I thought it would go in, but I still like it as an expression. This is like someone dropped something nearby and she's reacting to it. I don't know about all this. I think it's kind of amusing though. It's kind of a fun expression at least. If not, just a little bit strange. It's okay though. I'm okay with it. Alright, we'll outline it just to give it a little bit more visual interest. Because it's kind of a peculiar sketch. I'm sorry if these drawings seem like a step down in quality from the other ones, because these are all just kind of quick little doodles from my brain, and last sketchbook session I was actually doing some studies and putting a little bit more time and effort into everything, but I just want to see how people like a shorter form version of a sketchbook session. We'll see. I just want to see where everything falls and want to see your preferences with stuff. Because I have been in a little bit of a crisis lately, just trying to figure out what kind of content to make. Because I have lots of ideas, but it's like, I'm not sure if all of you are going to like those ideas. Because some of them are pretty crazy, like off the rails. Like, so much of it is, I don't want to just stick to making art content, because I just have a lot of ideas, but I am an art channel and I like making art content, so some of it is trying to be creative and find ways to make art content out of stuff that might not traditionally be art content, so it doesn't always transfer the best, but it is interesting to kind of come up with little ideas about how I might be able to sort of cross over some genres in order to make some like selfish videos that I just feel like making. I know most of you would probably be like, oh, that's fine, make whatever you want, but I feel like sometimes you can't really predict if you're gonna like something that someone makes. It might just end up being like kind of weird and not your speed, so we'll see. I understand if you guys aren't interested in some of the ideas I have, but I'm still thinking. Ideas still brewing in my head. We'll just... Ew. I don't know why Paul looks like such a doofus here, but I don't know, kind of like it. Am kind of also bothered by it at the same time, I don't know. I'm sorry if I'm moving around the page in a weird way. Sometimes whenever I'm working on spreads like this, I'll see something I want to fix, and I'll move up and do that, so I have to kind of be careful with how the camera is. So I think we're going to finish things up by doing one final doodle of Orchid, kind of using her powers, because I just think that would be kind of cool. So Orchid is like, I don't know if I would call her like a demon girl, but that's sort of the essence of where her inspiration comes from. Just sort of like kind of a witchy character design, I guess. So she has magic abilities that I haven't 100% pinned down what they are, but they are there. So she has these sort of like little spell things and some magic energy that she'll use. So that's what I'm drawing right here. Just her kind of rising up, levitating with her little magic thingies. I don't know, I'm partial to mage characters right now, because like I play as a mage in The Elder Scrolls Online, and I don't know, I just think they're really cool, so that's sort of her deal. Again, haven't completely written out how everything works quite yet, but and I think her hair will kind of hover a little bit too. And then that third eye kind of comes into view whenever her hair flies up. So kind of like so. Just take everything I say in this video for a grain of salt, though, because this project is very much still not developed. So if I ever make a comic of this and, you know, or actually turn it into a serious, complete work, don't come back to this video and be like, oh, this is the thing, because I'm still working on this, and it's still pretty rough as a concept and as an idea. Here I am going quiet again. It happens. I get so focused. I'm sure you other art people who do these sketchbook sessions know what I'm talking about. You get in the zone and then you are like, oh, I have to talk. I'm like pumping out art. How could I talk right now? So we kind of have a rough base sketch now. So we can kind of do some fun stuff here. Here, hopefully you guys can see that a little bit better. Okay. Let's try to make this look kind of decent. So, for anyone still watching now, and thank you to so many of you who actually like watched the whole last sketchbook session. I was really surprised by the response I got. People actually saying, hey, I watched like most of it, or made it at least even halfway through. Like, thank you guys so much. It's really cool. I am glad you enjoyed it. I guess if you didn't enjoy it, you probably wouldn't have watched that much of it. But for those of you who are still here with us, what is the main way that you guys come up with characters or OCs? Like, I'm genuinely interested. Is it normally like sort of a random thing where you're sketching around and you come up with an idea and like bam, that's a living, breathing character now? Or is it more of a planned thing of, oh, I just want to come up with an OC, so you start like designing and figuring out what you want them to do? Or a little bit of both? And how many of you actually like come up with a whole idea for a character, like who they are, what their motivation is, before actually sitting down to design them visually? Because I don't know who else does this, but I pretty much consistently design my characters visually before I know who they are and what they do. And in terms of storytelling, not the best thing to do. I think typically your character and who they are is supposed to inform what they look like, and you know, their role in the story plays a pretty big part as well. But I think retroactively, once I figure out who they are and their role in the story, I'll go back and redesign, and it seems like a lot more work that way, yeah, but it's just sort of how like it happens for me. I have had a couple instances where I sort of came up with who the character was before I designed them, but it's very rare, you know? This trio is kind of one of those cases, because the way I designed them, like I did a little doodle. If I remember to, I'll try to throw it up on screen. The first little doodle that I ever did of this trio, I intentionally was just kind of doodling in styles that were nothing like my own, and styles where I particularly wasn't super fond of it. That way I could get some of my own stylistic pitfalls out of the way and, you know, ignore some of the stuff that I constantly always do whenever I'm designing characters or coming up with ideas. And it worked pretty well, because I came up with these 3 characters that are definitely not something that I would normally come up with. And they have been around ever since, so cool little exercise to do, actually. If you ever want to come up with characters or ideas, just like draw in a style that is not your own, and maybe even one that you don't like or you're not drawn to, because then what you like about what the result is probably won't be like stylistic things. You can look past it to the more thematic aspects of what you've created, and I think that in terms of like characters and stuff, that's always a better judge of whether something actually works as an idea. I don't even remember where I was going with that, but yeah, I'm just curious how you guys come up with your characters, because I'm, at least in my mind, notoriously not someone who comes up with characters or writes things in the way that you're supposed to. And I think that's something that a lot of artists fall into, because like, you have such an art brain about things. If you're not also skilled in writing, you haven't spent time developing your mind in that sense, then you kind of always do things the way a visual developer would do them instead of the way a storyteller would. So just, I'm curious. Also, as I'm working on this, I'm realizing how awful her hair looks, but we'll improve that at some point. I'm sure I'll make it look better one of these days. 'Cause this is just an abomination. Like, I've kind of figured out how to make it look good flowing down, like this shape, but in motion, oh good, it's rough. It's not good. I think part of that is I'm not paying enough attention to what I'm doing, and I'm kind of just doing whatever. But it's a sketchbook, so like, it's fine if some of the stuff just looks sucky. Like, whatever. These hands barely look like hands. Like, they just look like hands, just enough for it to matter. And other than that, it's fine. speaking of earlier, sorry I'm getting off into like a tangent here, but earlier I was talking about how if your characters are too complicated that they can be really difficult to draw over and over again. I think that this trio of characters is a good example of paring down characters in a way that makes sense. And then to some extent like building them up again. Because I had much simpler versions of the character designs that you see here at one point, but they were more complex than that, and then I simplified them, and then I added some complexity back to them again, so that they fit my current style a little bit more. Because they were actually more difficult for me to draw when they were too simple, because I think that the art style just required too much simplicity, but in a way too much cleanliness too. Like, I had to ink things in a way where things were very smooth, and as you can tell here, it's not really my first inclination. Get it? It's, inking. I'm so sorry, make sure to unsubscribe down below. Anyways, whenever I make a joke like that, you know that the video has gone on for too long. Alright, so I'm just going to add some tone to this, and then I think next we're going to work on finishing up the page a little bit. I have a couple little ideas on how to do that, but I think that will be what closes out this sketchbook session. And if you guys do like the longer form stuff and you want me to go back to that, I'll try my best to figure out a way to edit them in a way that my computer does not disagree with, and get them up, upload them in a way. My internet's bad, my laptop's pretty good, but it doesn't like it whenever I try to render out hour-long videos. It just wasn't too fond of that, you know? Anyways, alright. I think this little doodle is mostly done, so we're gonna finish up the page now. Alright fellas, we've drawn ourselves some weird eyes, and that brings us to the end of this sketchbook session. All in all, I'm pretty happy with this page. Some of it looks like, you know, some looks a little better than others, but I think it was a really fun little page spread to do, and I had a lot of fun drawing my kids. I want to get back to doing some art that's sort of more just for me, some stuff that's indulgent and just fun, because I feel like that's what I had a lot of fun doing in my first sketchbook, and I got away from that a little bit more in my second sketchbook, trying to focus too much on, I don't know, always making like spreads that look nice. I feel like I need to stop treating every 2 pages like a spread. Like, I don't know if there's really any pages in this that aren't like together. Like, I like doing this, but I think some pages just need to be like weird and exist on their own. So let's cue some glamour shots. Thank you guys all so much for watching, especially if you made it to the end, in which case that's the only way you would be even hearing this. So thank you for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Leave me all of your suggestions and comments and questions down below. I love to talk to you guys and hear what is on your mind and what might interest you for future sketchbook sessions. Like, give me prompts and ideas too. I feel like some audience prompts would be pretty fun to do as like a spread. Like, so just let me know what you want me to do. I'll like straight up just do it. I need some ideas. Like, I'm feeling a little bit crusty. I'm like running short on ideas to put in my sketchbook that aren't just like the same things over and over again, like Pinterest girls. Like, you can only draw so many Pinterest girls. But hope you drew along, hope you enjoyed it. Leave me a comment and a like and a subscribe and hit the notification bell if you want to stick around and see more stuff that I do. Everyone who does that, I appreciate you so much, and I'll see you guys next week for some different other content that I don't know what it's gonna be yet, but hopefully it'll be good.